Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen and welcome to the latest edition of Seconds Out Reflections. Here every Monday at 4:30 p.m, albeit this one might be a little bit late, to talk about the boxing action of the weekend just gone. And there's no other fight really that I want to talk about this week except for Canelo Alvarez unifying another portion of the world super middleweight titles by deposing WBO champion, or former now WBO champion, Billy Joe Saunders after a horrendous eye injury. Caused the end of the fight at the end of round 8 on Saturday night in Arlington, Texas. It was actually a really good fight up until the end, very competitive, lots of thinking going on there, two strategic, cerebral fighters trying to outwit each other. And I thought the ending, or what precipitated the ending, the punch that Canelo landed, a right uppercut to Saunders' right eye, really exemplified that notion. Because he'd been trying to land that right uppercut throughout the fight, Saunders had always got out of the way of it, usually by rolling to his own right-hand side away from the shot. When the pivotal blow came, this time Canelo, instead of throwing it through the middle, threw it quite low down and managed to catch Saunders as he tried to roll out of the way. So as Saunders ducked to his right, Canelo met him with quite a low thrown right uppercut and caused a crazy amount of damage, apparently either 3 or 4 fractures to Saunders' orbital socket, the socket that holds the eye in place, of course. We've seen similar injuries before from Daniel Dubois, most recently Kell Brook, in consecutive fights with 2 different eye sockets. So obviously our best wishes and sympathy go to Billy Joe Saunders, who has undergone surgery already at hospital locally to where the fight took place. I know a lot of people have since brought up the fact that Saunders was rather less than charitable in his own views when a similar injury occurred to Dubois, but I don't think that should be held against him now. I think if anything, he's probably got a greater empathy for what Dubois went through, having been through it himself now. And no shame in Saunders' performance either. He was right in the fight. I had it 4-3-1 in favour of Canelo at the point the fight ended, but I thought Saunders had very much had a chance to still come through and come out on top via decision. But he was never able to hurt Canelo. I think maybe Alvarez seemed a little frustrated at times in trying to pin Saunders down, trying to get his shots off before Saunders moved out of the way. He was probably the most defensively sound boxer that Canelo has fought, certainly in recent times, maybe in his entire career. But I never thought Saunders was doing quite enough on the offensive side of the sport to really stamp his authority on the fight. I did give him 3 rounds, but they were close rounds, whereas the ones Canelo won tended to be more clear victories for him. And I think if the fight would have gone on, I think he was the bigger, stronger man, particularly at super middle. I think Saunders a couple of years ago and a weight lower may have had a better chance. But I think up at super middle, big, strong guy like Canelo with all the technical skills he has. And Saunders matched him for those technical skills and that boxing IQ. But I just think size, strength and power certainly proved pivotal. And now Alvarez goes on potentially for a fight with Caleb Plant in September. Cinco de Mayo is gone, but Mexican Independence Day weekend is still to come. I imagine Caleb Plant will want a lot of money to take that fight. I imagine DAZN and Canelo will have a lot of money for that fight. But he has the last piece of the jigsaw, the IBF super middleweight title, and Canelo wants to unify the division, and he's 3/4 of the way there in terms of the major belts at stake. Caleb Plant, very slick as well, but he is a more natural super middleweight than Billy Joe Saunders. He's taller, he's longer, and he is slick as well. I'm not sure he's quite as slick or as good with his feet as Saunders is, but we shall see, I suppose, if that fight ends up taking place. He is a bigger puncher at 168 pounds, so maybe that will help him to push Canelo back at times. But on the showing last night against a very, very good quality 2-weight world champion, unbeaten coming in, Canelo proved the superior fighter, and on that performance it's very difficult to see anyone in or around 160 or 168 beating him, and that includes Caleb Plant, sorry to say for him. As for Saunders, he's got some big decisions to make. It's only the first defeat of his career. He's clearly still got much to offer as shown by his performance, but having been through that type of injury, you've got to wonder whether he's going to want to carry on. I think he owns properties, he's invested his money wisely, and whether he wants to carry on with a dangerous career when he's already got, softened up, if you like. The eye will be repaired or has already been repaired and he'll heal up. but whether it's ever back to 100% is open to question. And you could understand why, after suffering that defeat, having so much money in the bank, achieved a lot, he's already managing fighters as well, whether he wants to continue. And if he chooses not to, if he chooses to call it a day, I don't think anyone can criticise him for doing so. You know, there's talk that Callum Smith, who's a recent Canelo victim, he might be thinking about the same thing. You can't blame them. You know, if they're set up for life now, what more has Saunders got to prove outside of a Canelo rematch, which, you know, may be quite difficult to make, certainly in the short term? Very little. He's already a two-weight world champion. Does he gain much in terms of his legacy now by fighting a Golovkin or a Charlo? And they're fights that he wouldn't necessarily be favoured to win after the damage he sustained and at this stage of their respective careers. So we wish Saunders the very best on his road to recovery. No disgrace at all in losing to Canelo. Great performance, just came up a little bit short. And for Canelo, it's onwards and upwards. And we hope the Caleb Plant fight can be made for September, or if not, not too long after that. I will be back on Thursday for the next Flexpectations, where we look ahead to the boxing action of the weekend, which will include Matchroom's big show, including Joshua Buatsi, who's main eventing, and 3 European title fights on the bill. And the next Reflections will be the following Monday, again at 4:30 PM. Thanks very much for your time, and I will see you all soon. Cheers.